Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and for today's card I decided to make my card base from watercolor paper. So I have some Canson XL watercolor paper that I trimmed down to 4¼ by 11 inches, and then I used the groove in my paper trimmer and my Teflon bone folder to score it at 5½ inches, so it's a top folding A2 sized card. And then I pulled out the Delicate Pretty Poppies stamp set from My Favorite Things. This set came out quite some time ago, but it is a favorite of mine. And well, it's still Remembrance Day as of doing this voiceover. I was behind as usual. This card has been in the back of my mind for some time now, so I wanted to get it made. So I got it uploaded onto my blog and now finally getting the video edited and uploaded for all of you. So I inked up the images from this set just with some Grout Gray ink, and I'm stamping it onto some Post-it tape. I could have stamped them with VersaFine, but I find when you stamp on Post-it tape with something like VersaFine, the VersaFine takes forever to dry on it. Like it smears, which is fine because these are just masks, but it gets on my fingers and then I transfer it onto the card. You know, it just makes a mess. So I stamped all those images with the Grout Gray ink and then trimmed them out with my scissors. So I've got masks for all of the flowers and the leaves. And then I started stamping directly onto my card base here, this watercolor paper with the VersaFine Onyx Black ink. So I stamped my first flower, masked it off, then stamped the stem, then the leaves. And then I masked off one of the leaves. And then I stamped another stem and a flower. My idea was to make kind of a cluster of flowers here on the left-hand side of my card. So just kind of using the mask as well to kind of give me a visual placement of where I wanted to stamp the flower. And then once I got that in place, I can apply the other mask. And I've said this before in other videos, but when it comes to masking, I always trim my mask like right on or just slightly inside the line. That way you don't end up with like a bit of ghosting around the image when you stamp over it. So after I was done all my stamping, I'm able to pull off the masks and it looks so much better. It always looks like such a mess with the masks on. It just, it's just finishes it off completely once you pull those masks off. So once I did that, I'm going to start doing some really simple watercoloring. I'm using my Clean Color Real Brush markers and my little water brush and just applying color and then pulling it out. Super, super simple. So I started with Carmine Red first, and this is more of a pinky red. It looks kind of red when you first apply it, but then when you really pull the color out, it looks much more pink. So I did that as my base layer, and then I added Wine Red. And same thing, I'm just applying color, on the most inner parts of the petals and then pulling the color out. And I was going to leave it at that, but then I thought I should add just a little bit more kind of depth and dimension. So I pulled in Deep Red and same thing, just added a bit to the edges and then pulled it out with my water brush. And I've super sped this up, but in between layers, it was mostly dry. I wasn't letting it completely fully dry. I wasn't too worried about it because I wasn't doing anything super in depth. And the nice thing too is because all these flowers were the same color, like those two that are side by side, I didn't worry too much about them bleeding into each other because they were the exact same color. If I was working with florals that were all different colors, I would have been much more careful about, making sure everything was completely dry so colors didn't bleed into each other, that sort of thing. But with the flowers, I did those 3 for the reds, and then for the centers, I used deep brown and dark brown, and then for the leaves, I used green and deep green. And then finally, I took a bit of mid-gray and just started applying that to the outer edges. This is where I was a little more careful, just because these markers reactivate very easily. So I would apply the mid-gray, and then I was a bit more careful with my water brush not to go over like the edges of the flowers or the leaves, because otherwise it would start pulling out the red and the green in that. But I just added a little bit of the gray, just add some shading. I've shown this in several other videos. And then I would just pull it out with my water brush and let it fade into nothing. So once this was all dry, I just used my little honeycomb adhesive. It's a temporary adhesive just to adhere the inside of the card so it would stay flat and keep it closed. And then I pulled out my Prima metallic watercolors that I've shown in a previous video that I'm really loving so far. And I mixed up this really pale gold and then that middle gold, which is one of my favorites. Just mix them out just to lighten it just a little bit and to experiment. But I just sprayed the watercolors directly with water. With these, I find you definitely want to let the water sit or mix it like I'm doing here. You can't just like get your brush wet and touch it and get all of a sudden get, a lot of metallic color. These do need to like soften a bit with water. So mixed them up a bit on an acrylic block, and then I'm splattering it onto my card here with the brush. And then I decided to use just the very tip of the brush, and I'm just kind of painting along the insides of these flowers here onto the little dots of the stamens. So dotting that along just somewhat randomly. I didn't fill in every single one, but it just gave it that little extra bit of definition. And since I still had some metallic watercolor left on the block, I didn't want to waste it, so I flicked that onto the card front as well. And once that was dry, I'm able to open my card back up again and just remove that adhesive with my fingers. And then I used the Twice the Thanks Die-namics from My Favorite Things, and I ran that through with some gold foil cardstock. And then I wanted to make sure these adhered in a straight line, because they're two separate words, and just the way they are, I wanted to make sure I didn't adhere them crookedly, because I'm pretty good at eyeballing things, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. So I used my little T-square ruler there, because I didn't want to draw a line or anything to have something that I would need to erase. I didn't want to erase after I'd done all this watercoloring and just risk messing it up. So I just used my T-square ruler to hold that against the card front there, to just give me a visual straight edge so that I could adhere this sentiment. And I'm using my multimedia matte adhesive, and I just painted it along the back of the die cut and adhered the thank first and then the U. So once I've got those completely adhered, for the inside of the card, I took some Cherry Crisp cardstock, and I'm stamping a companion sentiment from the Kind Thanks stamp set, and I'm stamping that with Versamark ink onto the cardstock that I'd already treated with my anti-static powder tool. And then I'm using Wow Rich Gold Pale embossing powder. And this wasn't my original plan. You're going to see I'm going to adhere this over the sentiment I already stamped on the inside of the card, and I'd stamped it in the VersaFine Onyx black, and I'd accidentally rocked the stamp a little bit and made a mess of my card. And since this was all a one layer card, I was like, great, I'm going to have to like cut the front off, completely change what I'm doing. Didn't want to do that. So I stamped sentiment embossing gold, and it actually worked even better that way, because the sentiment is you have a heart of gold. So it just kind of pulled it all in. So adhered that right over the messed up one, and you can't even tell. So it'll be our little secret. So that finished off my card for today. As always, there will be a link below the video to my blog post with links to all of the supplies used. So if you're interested, check that out below. And here at the end, I will have a couple other videos, one using that metallic watercolor and the other one using the clean color real brush markers. So check those out if you haven't. Thank you all so much for watching, subscribing, and thumbs upping my videos, and I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.